This gospel today is for All Saints' Day. It helps us to understand what it means to be a saint. And Jesus put it pretty simple. When he was asked which commandment is the first of all, Jesus answered, the first is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God. The Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. And then he goes on to say this, and the second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There's no other commandment greater than these. So that pretty well sums up what it means in Jesus' mind, what it means if you want to become a saint, by following these two commandments. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how do we do that. Well, the one thing that's important is that we all have an inclination in our hearts to be sort of set in our ways as time goes on. And probably most of us don't realize it, but we live in a world that's pretty much good or bad, or sick or healthy, honest or dishonest, success or failures, and we sort of oversimplify all of the different ways that we describe situations and the way we describe people. And real life is really made up of slight edges and not fars and near misses. But Jesus made it real clear when he talked to the scribes, and he also says to the scribe that when he said Jesus was told he was answered correctly, and the scribe said, and then Jesus said, you're not far from the kingdom of God. But Jesus also didn't say you were there either. So for one thing that's hard for us to do is to make commitments. And I think the reason we don't want to make a commitment is the instinctive fear of the unfamiliar. We're creatures of habit. We like our old habits. We're like our old ruts, sort of. And as I have described ruts many times as a grave with the ends kicked out, still in the grave when we in our ruts. We do adjust to them, and they're very familiar. And we don't like to sort of have new ideas and new thoughts. And I believe that's why Jesus can be, and indeed should be, such a disturbing influence in our lives. Because Jesus is constantly asking us to make changes, to live up to a different level of living, and to sort of go outside of the box. And he had a hard time with people who were like always wanting to quote the old. But after all, you got to remember, the New Testament is the New Testament. It's not the Old Testament. And Jesus lived with the old, and learned the old, but he wanted to preach the new. So it's important for us to get out on our own in a way and see how we can stretch out and live and grow and be challenged and allow ourselves to be challenged. There's a whole new world out there when we can be challenged. Another factor in this borderline kind of living is the inherent difficulty of making a decision. Sometimes we just don't want to make decisions. It's difficult. And of course, if we don't understand the options, it's hard to make a decision. So let's try to see today how the gospel tells us, make real clear, Jesus gave us a real clear message. It's not difficult to understand what he had to say. And in loving God and loving our neighbor, and that's very difficult at times. But love for God and people is more than a theory about life. It's a way of living. And if we get into the habit of really thinking about the other person and the other people, then it's easier for us to get into the habit of making constant changes, because people constantly change and people constantly confront us in a new way. So if we're willing to make that movement of journey, thinking outside the box, we'll be doing what Jesus asked us to do. And that's how we become saints.